Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Parthaya Pratibodhitam Bhagavata Narayanena Swayam Vyasena Kratitam Purana Muninam Madhye Mahabharatam Advaitam Vritavarshinim Bhagavatim Ashtadashadhyayinim Ambatva Manusantatami Bhagavad Gita Bhavatveshini Namostu te Vyasa Vishala Buddhe Pulla Ravindayata Patra Netra Yena Tvaya Bharata Taila Purnaha Prajvalito Jnanamaya Pradipaha Prapanna Parijataya Totra Vetraika Panaye Jnanamudraya Krishnaya Geetamrutatuhe Namaha. Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsa Chanuramardanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadgurum Sarvadharman Parityajya Mamekam Sharanam Vraja Aham Tva Sarva Papebhyaha Mokshayishyami Ma Shuchaha. So we are now in the section of ninth chapter, where we are discussing about the creation and the dissolution of the universe. So far, we discussed about really the nature of God from the point of Paraprakriti. Apara Prakriti we discussed already in the 7th chapter, and then Paraprakriti, which is a higher nature. So when we think about creation and dissolution of the world, of the universe, in the 5th verse, actually, Krishna had already pointed out that how he is the creator. He is the creator. He is also the dissolver. Okay. He uses term, the Srishti, Sthiti, Laya, creation, sustenance, and dissolution. And, in this shloka, it says, Nacha Mastani Bhutani, ending with Mamatma Bhuta Bhavanaha. So he says that he is the creator. But then we came to shloka 7 and 8, where we started seeing last time, which is really the explanation of what that Jagat Karanatvam. Jagat meaning the world, Karanam, the cause of the whole world. So he describes about that. So how does he really create the world? So this, he says in those shlokas, which we saw before, how he is really the whole creation itself actually exists in him in a very unmanifest form. Because, when Arjuna says, when Krishna tells Arjuna, hey, I'm the person, I'm the one who's a creator and everything, Arjuna looked at him and says, how is that possible? And he says, yeah, it is possible, but me in my unmanifest form. Just like, for example, you take an orange, and in the orange, you enjoy the sweetness and everything, but then it has the seeds. What do you do with the seeds? The seeds are actually, the one seed of it can create a whole world. But when you see the seed, you don't think about it. So it is in a very unmanifest form, right? So it has a lot of potential. We call this, it is in a potential form. So that is what Krishna is trying to say. So what I wanted to do today for the reflection time, okay, I want each one of you to think about really what this aspect of God that we are really trying to understand, And if everybody says, our goal is moksha, which is realizing that ultimate Paramatman, then what is it? And I just thought I'll put this quote. Can anybody recognize from where this quote is from? If you don't, what is that?
Alice in Wonderland?
Alice in Wonderland, exactly. Exactly. I just thought about this quote because if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. So today, we live in this world looking for happiness, but we really don't know where this happiness is. And depending upon our own mental state, whatever we do can make us happy. Okay. But at the end of the day, we believe that the ultimate source of happiness is that God. And uh, for us in a human form, it is possible to go to that level. But if I don't know how to reach that point, then and I'll be always floundering, and any road will probably get me that happiness, but it is not the ultimate happiness. Okay. So I was just trying to connect the quote with this whole thing. So having said that, I guess a reflection point for each one of us, because this chapter of ninth chapter is the most powerful of all the chapters, because it talks about the essence of the Upanishad. Okay, the essence of the Upanishads are in the shlokas all the way from 4 to 10. So that is why we are spending a little more time thinking about it. So I want to ask each one of you, when you think about that ultimate Paramatman, okay, Paraprakriti, we are talking about, what qualities comes to your mind? And in the next slide, actually, I have all those qualities listed, but I just thought I'll ask you.
I did not understand the question.
The question is, so when we think about that ultimate Paramatman or God, okay, uh, what are the qualities that comes to your mind about that Paraprakriti, the higher nature of the God? In 7th chapter, he talks about how that God has a higher nature, which is that Paraprakriti, and the lower nature, which is Aparaprakriti, which is all the manifestation. So what comes to your mind when you think
Hari Om.
about that?
Hari Om.
Yeah.
Hari Om,
Yes.
Sunitha.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Sharda?
Nirakara Niranjana Nirguna Nirakara Niranjana Sarvavyakti, omnipresent,
Yeah.
omnipotent, omniscient.
Correct. Those are some of the most, you're saying it already from the Upanishads and from other texts, right? Um, Very good. Excellent. Anant,
Hari Om.
Yes, Anant.
When we think of that, all great qualities, just come to mind. Like anything, whatever you see, you think of something big, then, bigger than the biggest. So that kind of, all the great qualities one can imagine. Yeah, that comes to my
Right.
mind.
Very good. Meenu, you wanted to say?
Whenever you think of God, the first thing comes in mind is love. And he's
Right.
Sharnagat Vatsal. Whosoever
Mhm.
comes to him, he accepts without any
Reservation.
any reservation.
Right. Very nice. But when
And
you think about this chapter, yeah, go ahead, Madhuri. You wanted to say?
yeah, no, Gunatita, just like
Yeah.
Meenu said, it's above all the gunas. So
Yeah, Guna Atita. Yeah, very good. Now, when you come to this chapter so far, what are the qualities that you can think about from these shlokas, what we've done so far? Yeah.
That is beyond time and space,
Uh-huh.
and creation, preservation, and destruction, they go on. he doesn't
Uh-huh.
get involved, but it just goes on. And
Right.
at the end of a kalpa period, they all come and merge into him.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So
Hari
that
Om.
you're already talking about the shlokas 7 and 8. Yes, very good, Amma.
Yeah,
He is
all the
the
universe is
supporter of
inside him.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead, Anand.
He supports everything. Yeah.
He supports everything. Very good. Excellent. Anything else?
All the universe is inside him.
Inside him. Okay, very good. All the manifest is in the unmanifest. Correct? Yeah.
Yes.
The example that I just gave you of this orange seed. Yeah. Mhm. Very good. So this is basically what I thought, so far what we have covered so far in the shlokas, avyakta, the unmanifest, what Anant was referring to, and then what Amma was referring to, which is sarvagatatvam, all, no, she was referring to the support of the support, which is this Jagat Adhishtanam, right? On whom rests the whole creation. And then he's untouched. This also came up in the shlokas 6, I think, because we talked about the example of space and wind. For example, in Florida, you may have all kinds of tornadoes, raging through. But then after some time, everything is clear, right? I'm sorry, tornadoes are on the other part of United States. I'm forgetting my geography here, and but you have all the other storms and everything that happens in the Florida coast, and then you have all the tornadoes in the Midwest. Nothing touches that para prakriti, that higher nature of God, that Paramatman. And then we talked about, Amma talked about this, which is the cause of creation, dissolution, everything happens, all the kalpas, everything happens in this, um, in this Paramatman, But Paramatman is untouched and all pervading, is the support of the entire visible universe. It is avyakta, unmanifest. So the just thought I'll put the whole thing here. And these couple of things last time I had here, but I think we kind of went through it a little fast. But the point being is that Paramatman represents the truth. So this, and what is the reason for it to not be there? Because it is its nature to not, where is my, because it is its nature to be, it cannot but be, just very kind of cryptic statements here. But the idea being that uh, it is, it is avyakta, it is the substratum, it is the support of the whole universe, and it is that absolute truth what we are seeking. And this is why I put that Lewis Carroll quote as well, which is to show that, we are seeking towards that truth. And it is a truth which is that infinite self. And it is something which is just there. It is, and if we understand this, we can even understand the reason for meditation, everything, because our meditation allows us to go back to our own nature and just be, So, and it is this isness which is actually represented in so many different parts of the apara prakriti part of it. For example, the sun. We never question why is the sun bright or hot. It is its nature. It is the essence. So too, the essence of the ultimate essence of that Paramatman is that truth, and it is uh, what it is, if I want to use it in a very simple manner. So that it is that absolute truth. It is what we are trying to be, trying to reach. And it is really ourself. And at the highest level, that is what our nature. So it is an aspect of consciousness, and it is also very complete. If I can take that understanding and what Meenu also said, which is pure love, ultimately it is that absolute pure bliss, pure love state, and it is complete, and it is our complete nature. And that is where we are all trying to reach. So Krishna says that everything ultimately is because I am not because they are, I am because I cannot not be that ultimate self. So this is the most powerful things that Krishna is really explaining in all these shlokas of 4 to 6 almost. So I just wanted to give you that very high level cryptic message, if you think it is, but it is where we are trying to reach ultimately, which is that avyakta state. We are that absolute potential form, and this is really truly our nature. This is the nature of the entire world. This is that ultimate nature of that absolute truth. And we are complete. We are completely fulfilled. There is nothing else that we need to seek in our higher nature. But yet, we become very attached to our lower nature, and we start seeking for that completeness in all the lower nature, which we can never ever achieve because they are the finite aspect. But in my true nature, I am that infinite, which is complete, and which is the nature of that absolute self. So that is where we had come. So this is just a reflective part of it, which I wanted to introduce. Any questions or thoughts before we go further up to? So that is why in Shloka 6, he compares that space, the closest thing that we can even understand that completeness, that fulfillment and everything is this comparison of space to Ishvara, because it is in space that things are there. Like it is in space that we have this agarbati's smell. Today I may have the agarbati smell, tomorrow I may not have it. Today I may have all the storms, today I may have the tornadoes, everything happening in this space, tomorrow I may not have it. But ultimately, space continues to be what it is. So if I can get to that level of understanding what the nature of space is, I will come to that extent close to really understanding that the reality of that absolute Paramatman. Just like space accommodates everything, everything is in space, so too that Paramatman accommodates everything. And at the end of the day, as much as it accommodates everything, it doesn't get affected by it. The space doesn't get affected if there's a fire burning. Space doesn't get affected. Like even in San Diego, right now, recently you had this, atmospheric river or something, that phenomena which happened, which is something unimaginable, right? But that all thing is happening in space. And we have enough shlokas in chapter 2, for example, Achedyo Yamadahyo Yam, where you cannot even cut space, you cannot burn space, everything. So too, that's how that nature Paramatman is. So all these things, we we discussed it and just wanted to kind of wrap it up as a reflective exercise. So then, now that we understood what that absolute Paraprakriti is, that Paraprakriti is really the source for creation also. How does that happen? So for us today, we look at creation and dissolution as a kind of a linear process. Something is created, something is sustained, and something just dies. So we think it is linear, one leading to another. But in our philosophy, we look at it about how this creation is not a linear process, but is actually a very cyclic process. We get hung up on the linear process, and we think that, for example, even with looking at the sky, well, that's just an example to show how ultimately everything is nothing but an illusion. But this is why, so in Shloka 7, we find that he talks about how Sarva Bhutani Kaunteya Prakritim Yanti Mamikam Kalpakshe Punah Tani Kalpado Visrujami Aham. So he talks about that at the end of the day, all the beings, they merge into my Prakriti. So Prakriti is this lower nature of Paramatman. And in that, everything keeps happening again and again and again. And he says, Kalpami Visrujami Aham. So I I project this whole universe. Just like, for example, we said this example of space in which things happen, things seem to be created, things seem to die. So too, in this case, this is how it is, so it is this Prakriti Pralaya, the cycle is actually the largest, which is again in chapter 8, we saw the Brahmaji's lifetime. It's a Mahapralaya. So just like how we, on an individual scale, we seem to be taking a birth, living and going back. Now you can imagine this individual, which is multiplied in millions and millions of times with the whole Srishti. Okay. That Srishti Praya, how, that happens. We already came up with all those numbers, huge amount of years. We are right now in the Kali Yuga, which is in the middle of the, the cycle, which is so huge, which will take many years before this whole pralaya can really happen. So if you look at this from a scientific point of view, we can look at this as, maybe even this law of conservation of matter and energy. We know that nothing is really created, nothing is destroyed. They are only being recycled, Even an ounce of matter cannot be created by anyone, including God. Now here, we are looking at God from a standpoint of the form of God, In the level of formless, it's different. So in the formless, the creation is happening, but how it is happening, we are going to discuss this. But these shlokas, this avyakta dini bhutani vyakta madhyani bharata, avyakta nidhanan yeva tatraka paridevana. In chapter 2 itself, Krishna was referring to this. And again, in the 8th chapter, he talks about avyakta vyaktaya sarvaha prabhavante haragami ratrayagami praliyante tatra avyakta samyake. So the shlokas have already talked about this aspect of the cyclic nature. So how do I understand that this aspect of Srishti Laya happening in that God, which is not doing anything? So is that really possible? So that part of it, we can look at it from an example of a dream. Okay. Now, in a dream, we know that, when I go to bed, I can create an entire drama of everything, which when I wake up, ultimately the whole thing then just goes back into my own self, right? So that, if I can just take that as an example, then I can understand how this whole creation is happening in that space, So just like how it is happening in the dream. So creation is actually, therefore, you can look at it as more of a cyclic process, and it's not really linear. And this is a part that he actually talks about in the shloka number 8. So in shloka number 7, he basically says that, all this creation, they seem to live for a short period of time and they merge back into the Prakriti. And from an individual point, we can understand that. But now we have to look at it from a collective point of view. How does it happen? And that's what this whole thing of Kalpa comes into play, and Brahmaji and everything. And in shloka number 8, now he's trying to show that how this whole thing cannot be possible if they are not illumined by that consciousness principle. Because Prakriti as such, Prakriti, which is nature, if you think about it, all this is very inert. It's like this, you have this projector, the projector in which you have each one of these frames, which is really sort of the scene of a movie which is frozen. But what good is it if it is in the form of that reel? But only when the light shines on each one of these frames will each one come to life, right? So to here he's saying that Prakriti is like this film, that Prakritim Swam Prakritim Swam Avashtabhyaha. So having animated that Prakriti itself, Visrajami Punaha Punaha. So he says, how by just giving that consciousness, by illuminating that slide, or in this case, illuminating each one of the nature, he brings forth again and again all these multitude of beings helpless by the force of nature. So there are two things here. On one hand, he provides the consciousness to animate that Prakriti. And this slide example is really the most beautiful one, I feel, which gives you an idea of it. But at the end of the day, he says, I'm not really responsible for how each one of the beings turn out to be. That nature of the being that comes out to be is due to its own vasanas. Okay, so helpless. So each being comes into existence due to their own vasanas, and they come helplessly in the sense, once a certain vasanas are created, there's nothing that needs to be done to push that thing forward. All that Paramatman is doing is illuminating that aspect. It's like, Swami Chinmayananda would say, right? When somebody is driving a car, to blame an accident on the petrol is not right. The petrol just gives the power for the car to drive. But ultimately, how the car is driven is the nature of the driver. So to here, every being which comes into existence is due to their own nature, and how that being makes what they do is dependent upon their own destiny, whatever they have done in the past. That is not Paramatman's nature. All Paramatman does is just provide the consciousness, just like how to drive a car, the fuel is needed. That's all it does. So Prakritim Swama Avashtabhya, I again and again send forth all these multitude of beings. So Paramatman's thing, nature is, you told me what you wanted to do. I will give you whatever you need in order to make success of your life. So, for example, if there is somebody who is a saint, or there is somebody who is, a thief. Now, a thief wants to come back to do more based upon that thief's vasanas, whereas a saint comes into existence to satisfy whatever the world's needs are. They too came because of that. So, and that is helpless, and that's why this word helpless is very needed, because it's due to their own individual nature. They are helplessly, they come into being, they come into existence. So aham punaha punaha visrajami. So he says it is really unstoppable. All I'm doing is, you have created that need to come into the world, and I will make sure that that is done. I'll help you with that process. So then in shloka number 9, a question may arise, what about the Lord himself, Is he really detached from the whole process? Or is he also completely involved in this whole thing, in this process? So to remove that doubt, he then gives the next shloka. But before we go there, I just wanted to ask, is there any question or doubt or anything that people want to add to the 2 shlokas that we discussed so far?
Hariom, one question.
Yeah.
Why is the Prakriti called lower nature? Is that
Prakriti in 7th chapter itself we discussed, because the lower nature is determined by the finitude. When I say finite, it is governed by time and space. Whereas the higher nature is not governed by time and space. And the lower nature is something which is, is subject to the creation, dissolution, and maintenance, that cycle. That's why it's a lower nature.
Thanks.
Yeah. So in shloka number 9, he says how he himself is not affected. Just like how this example that I gave of the car, where the fuel itself, does its job, but it is not the reason for a particular act of the driver, right? So too, here he says, Nachamam tani karmani nibadnanti dhananjaya udasina vadasinam asaktam teshu karmasu. So he's udasina, he's completely indifferent to what is happening. So for example, and people say, how come God allowed such negative things to happen in the world? He's actually above anything which is positive or negative in the world. That is very important to understand, and also something to keep in mind, because we say this, or this thought comes to people's minds, and but if we recognize the fact that not only is he responsible for not only is he not responsible for the good things, but he's also not responsible for the bad things. But when something's good happened to us, we immediately say, oh, it is because of because I prayed so much, because I went to Tirupati so many times. This is why it happened. The idea behind going to Tirupati is a little different. If I go with the bhav that I recognize that Paramatman in that idol, then it's different. But when I go there with the idea that I need something to be happening only for me or whatever, then it's different. So that's why he says, Nachamam tani karmani, these acts, they appear to be mine, but they are not necessarily mine. And because they're not mine, they do not na nibadnanti. So it does not really bind me. So ultimately for us, for common mortals like us, it is our own attachments to things that really binds us. Whereas I'm udasinam, I'm completely indifferent to it, and I sit unattached, asaktam, teshu, in all the acts of what is being done. So that is what and therefore he says, all these creation, dissolution, etc., all that is actually, it's a collective force that is helping to keep this whole world in balance. But he's even beyond that aspect. So at the level of Ishvara, things are happening, but so he's not the karta. He's first of all, he's not the bhokta, which is what he's trying to show here. It doesn't bind me. The binding comes only when I'm a bhokta. I'm an enjoyer of my actions. But when I'm not even a bhokta, how can I be even a karta? So he is completely about this. So tani karmani mam na nibadnanti. So he's really way about this. And the karmas really don't bind him. He doesn't accrue. He doesn't even get any benefit from any of the karmas. And he continues to do what he has to do. And teshu karmasu asaktam. He's completely unattached to it. So he's not even identified with any of the actions. He just does whatever he needs to. Again, a beautiful verse to help practice, and something which, does anybody have something to say?
Hari Om, I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Is there any difference between relationless relationship and detached attachment?
Very good question. Relationless relationship and detached attachment.
Yes.
They are detached attachment actually leads to relationless relationship.
Okay.
Okay. So it is a step-by-step process. It is not the same. It is a step-by-step. In detached attachment, one is, it's a kind of a sadhana, So anything and everything I do, if I recognize myself that I'm an instrument, and I think I've brought this example before, how in Sanskrit, you have these two cases. One is karmani prayoga, one is as a doer, and the other one is as an instrument. The third case is an instrument, So when I recognize myself as an instrument, then I'm practicing detached attachment. So detached attachment is a sadhana. And only by practicing detached attachment for a long time, so much so that it becomes part of my nature, then what happens is I get to the level of being a sakshi bhava, a witness to the actions. So, for example, it's like, an example that can be given is, I can think of a couple of examples. One of them, which I will give you, it's in nowadays in corporate world. And when I was working in my company, we were taught this one thing called the balcony and the dance. Okay, so what it is imagine this floor where there's a lot of dance going on, okay? And you are one of the dancers. So when you're in the dance, you're dancing and everything, you're very involved in the action. But let's say you're in the balcony, okay? From the balcony, you're watching the whole dance unfolding in front of you. So that's a kind of it's a mindset behavior change that I had to actually, there was a course that I went through, which is called as Mindsets and Behaviors. And in this, so this is one of the techniques, you can even Google this thing and you'll get to it. So what I'm saying is that by practicing this detached attachment, one actually gets to a state where one is a witness. So even though you are part of the whole thing that is going on, you are actually watching even yourself as a player in this whole drama. Okay, you are detaching yourself. That leads to the detached attachment. Okay, so you get to that level of being a witness. Once you get to the level of witness, then what happens is you get to the next level. of this relationless relationship. Now, what is that? It is a very powerful state where one recognizes the temporariness or the fleeting nature of every incident that is happening. You know, one gets, and this again, of course, I'm just giving this as a logic progression, but there is a lot of sadhana involved in order to get to these three different levels. So in a relationless relationship, you ultimately recognize each one of the incidents that is happening in your life as how temporary it is, number one. And the second thing is one can also get to a level of recognizing what led to these incidents. Okay. And you see that it is some behavior, some kind of a simple attachment, some attachment to something which led to development of an event. Let's say, as a simple example, normal example, nothing too complicated. If we take our own lives, when you have your kids, you have two kids, one kid is really interested in soccer, and another kid is interested in something else. Now, because I am interested in music, I will put my child through music. Okay. It's my attachment to music which prompts me to take my child to music lessons or whatever. Maybe the child is interested, maybe the child is not interested. That is not the point. But the point is my own attachment to something prompts an action to happen. So if you look at through the lens of the whole life, right? Each and every action which happens through it, through our life, is actually dictated by a certain attachment of what I had, each event. So this relationship phase of our life allows us, it's a most powerful, of course, the highest level of where you want to be. You slowly see that we are developing a relation because of our attachments. So on the corollary to that is when I'm detached, which is why the detached attachment is a good starting point. When I constantly practice a detached attachment, then I see that every event was actually nothing but a kind of an illusion, which I created it myself.
Okay.
And so you recognize that the life itself is nothing but an illusion. That's what it leads to. And that is where the great Mahatmas, are able to live their lives. They're in and through the world, but they recognize that they do not have any relation as such. The relations are prompted primarily because of the attachment to certain things. I don't know, does it make sense?
In simple words, we can say detached attachment is at the human level, and relationless relationship is at a higher level, like you said, Mahatma or
Correct.
and above
Exactly.
that.
Yep.
Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you so much.
No problem. Thank you for bringing it up, because the more and more we think about or reflect upon these terminologies also, it allows us to recognize what is my progress, where am I in my sadhana.
And your explanation was very good. Thank you so much.
So now we're coming to the last shloka in this series, which really talks about this the udasina, the udasina aspect, what we talked about, the indifference and the detachment of Paramatman from his creation. So this is just to bring about, this idea that the Paramatman doesn't change, due to the process, because of the process of creation. Actually, I think I had, maybe I will bring it up. I didn't put it into my slide deck here, but on my last slide, I will show you this example of a puzzle, to show how each one of us are actually affecting the destiny of somebody else in this whole creation. Okay? Paramatman by himself doesn't do anything. Paramatman is in that relationless relationship or this detached attachment, however way you want to look at it. Paramatman is way about that. And again, using that example, what I said about the fuel, he just gives the consciousness, he gives the existence, he gives all that for us in order for us to play ourselves. But he himself doesn't undergo any change. The changes happen because of the collective nature of each one of us. The Prakriti, which is a collectivity, collectiveness, because of that, that is the one which actually causes all these changes and the creation, everything. He himself remains absolutely changeless. So this is really the key principle in our Vedanta philosophy, that supreme is an absolute constant. Nothing, he is not subject to any mathematical permutation, combinations. He's an absolute constant factor. Everything else can then be just measured with reference to that constant. And if we didn't have this constant to relate everything to, it will be impossible actually for us to bring any sense of reality. What is really that reality? It is that reality which doesn't undergo any change. It is absolute. That part of it needs to be completely clear, and that is where our Vedanta philosophy really takes you to, that unchanging, you want to call that as a baseline, what is that absolute baseline? What is that absolute constant factor? It is that Brahman, which is completely aloof from all creation, completely, and it's very different from how, the Semitic religions, right? They look at it differently. But for us, that is he's completely aloof. He's completely transcendent, if you want to think about it. So all these is how we define our God, our absolute nature of God. So that is what in shloka number 10, he talks about all this things that we already talked about, the Sakshi Bhava and everything. And he says, Maya Dhyakshena Prakritihi Suyate Sacharacharam Hetu Nanena Kaunteya Jagat Viparivartate. So, under me as a supervisor, and I just have one example here. He says, Mayad Adhyakshena Prakritihi. Under me as her supervisor, Prakriti, that is this totality, this total nature, which includes, when we say nature, what I mean by here is the nature of, all the inert materials. And what are those inert materials? Which is, all the trees, the stones, the mountains, the rivers, including our inert nature, which is our physical body, anything which has got some grossness associated with it. So, under me as a supervisor, Prakriti produces the moving and the unmoving, chara and achara. He produces. Because of this, O Kaunteya, the world show goes on and on. It just revolves. Jagat vipari vartate. Hetu, because of this. The cause, the reason. Hetu anena Kaunteya. So, under my supervision, the entire thing goes around. So here again, he's trying to show. Now, somebody may say that, okay, see, here he's saying that he is the one who is directing it. He's the one who's doing it. So he is the ultimate supervisor. When he says ultimate supervisor, he is not partial to anybody. Everything happens under his supervision in that sense. He's the most impartial supervisor at all times. So but he does this, and he allows this entire world to to proceed in that manner. So that is the again relationless relationship. So to give an example here, so Maya Adhyakshena Prakriti. So, for example, in all these things, this electricity, for example, is common to everything. But ultimately, how the electricity is being used in this three different equipment is dependent upon the equipment, the nature of the equipment. Here I have this iron box here, and then we have this ovens, and we have the refrigerator in each one of them. Now, even here, like in Dhrikdrisha Vivek, in second shloka, he says about how ultimately how that electricity is being used is dependent upon the nature of the equipment, which is like, for example, let's say, I have an old iron. That electricity, may not is actually not able to function well because of the old nature of the iron. But then what do we do when some things happen? We again taking this example to our lives. When something doesn't work, we immediately blame it on God. Just like how in here, if the iron doesn't work, we kind of blame it on, okay, the iron doesn't work, and we just throw it. Of course, we don't blame the electricity in here. We do blame the fact that the iron is old, or, it's faulty and all those things. So electricity is impartial. Electricity will give its thing to anything and everything, but ultimately how we use it is dependent upon the equipment. So too here, what he's trying to show is the thing about it is that each one of us individually are responsible for how I am allowing myself to be part of that whole thing. Like, for example, when Minu said, love is everywhere. It's a matter of how I'm allowing that surrender. You use that beautiful surrender. What was the word, Minu, you used for surrender? Adhyaksha, something you used, right?
It was Sharnagat Vatsala.
Sharanagati Vatsala. Sharanagati Vatsala. So that surrendering aspect, it's up to me on how much I surrender myself to that Vatsala, that Lord, So to hear, this is just to give, so he's at the end, a Sakshi Bhava, we have to use that. And he's again trying to say that ultimately the show goes on and on because of that power, which is that Lord. It's not that he is partial to somebody and therefore, it happens. It's more on how I recognize that absolute nature is to that extent I get the grace of the Lord. And I had this one example which I was trying to build it. Like, for example, here this is a jigsaw puzzle, okay, which has got so many pieces. This is just to show you the different pieces, But each one of this piece, in order for us to get the most beautiful jigsaw puzzle, I have to make sure that each one of the pieces works with each other, okay? The designer has designed this beautifully, has given it to me. That's all that the designer can do. But ultimately, how I put these pieces together and make this work is up to me, and it is dependent on each one of these pieces. And this is what Prakriti is all about. Prakriti is this entire nature where we have to find ways to fit ourselves and to make it work. And the more and more we fit ourselves, the more beautiful this world is. The minute I think that I'm the one who is very important and I don't want to fit in and everything, the greater the problems in the universe. And that is, again, ultimately the reason why today we are having more and more mental health issues is because of the individuality which is coming and creeping through, where I think I have everything. I have my house, I have my family, everything ultimately, but I don't recognize the nature of how the designer had put me through the whole thing. So I was trying to build this, but I thought at least I'll show you that example for here. So this, in short, now completes this whole section of really who is that God, and that is why I started this lecture today with saying that, if I don't know where I'm going, anything can take me there. To say that ultimately, if I know that my goal ultimately is reaching that Paramatman, these shlokas in shlokas almost 4 to 10, in a very powerful way, gives you that whole roadmap, starting with, and thanks to Meena for this, for giving the detached attachment to relationless relationship, this whole picture here. So we'll end over here. Any last minute thought? We have 1 minute or 2 minutes, but anything to add? If not, we will conclude. Sarve bhavantu sukhinah, sarve santu niramayaha, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschid dukkha bhag bhavet. Om shanti shanti shantihi. Om purnamadav purnamidam purnat purnamudachyate. Purnasya purnamadaya purnameva vashishyate. Om shanti shanti shantihi. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.
Hari Om. Thank you, Sunitha ji.
You're welcome. You're welcome. I'm trying to see how I can.
Hari Om, Sunitha. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Hari Om.
Thank you,
Hari Om.
Sunitha. Hari Om.
Hari Om.
We stop the
Thank you, Sunitha ji.
Yeah, I'm trying to see how I can stop the recording. I'm not able to get to that screen.
Hari Om, thank you so much.
You're welcome. You're welcome. 1 second, I don't know. Where is the...
You don't have recording here, Sunitha. Recording is not there now.
Now it's not there? Okay.
No.
Maybe it's... there it is. 1